Hi, Stacy. Welcome to the Booked on Rock podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm so happy to be here.
It's great to have you on. I want to ask you about the new books that you've released and the Rock and Roll Nightmare series of books, but I'd love to find out more about your background. You are a Los Angeles native, correct?
I am, but I've been
Okay.
living in Las Vegas for almost 5 years now.
Okay. Now, you started writing at the age of 12?
Well, I started writing before that, but I was published at the age of 12 in a
Yeah, professionally.
magazine. So, yeah, I've always loved writing. My mom was a writer, so I think that's where I got it from.
That's cool. So your dad is Don Wilson, the guitarist and founding member of the Ventures, who recorded some of the most timeless songs, including Hawaii Five-O and Walk Don't Run, Perfidia, Apache, the list goes on. They
It
did
sure does.
it does, it goes on and on. They did a great version of Wipeout, and they had 5 LPs in the Billboard Top 100 at the same time in 1963. That's
Yeah, I
true.
wasn't around, but I read about it.
Yeah, a huge influence on guitars for decades to come. Now, your dad
Oh,
passed in early 2022. My condolences. I lost my dad about a year and a half ago.
oh yeah, it's something you never get used to.
Yeah, and I mean, and he was a huge influence on me as a broadcaster and a writer. What kind of impact did he have on you while growing up?
My dad will actually being funny. He loved to
Yeah.
tell jokes. He was a great fan of dad jokes. In fact, he might have been the original, the OG dad joker. So having a sense of humor, being creative, and following your dreams, which is
Yeah.
the same as my mom. You know, both of them never had a day job. They always did what they loved to do and found a way to make it work.
And you produced the documentary, the 2020 documentary on your dad's band called The Ventures, Stars on Guitars. What a list. John Fogerty's in it, Waddy Wachtel, Randy Bachman, Jeff Skunk Baxter, Jimmy Page appear in there, along with, of course, your dad. What was that experience like, being able to put together all of those great stories and get your dad's stories in there and get all those stories told?
Really, it was kind of, I guess if you think about it, in the nick of time, because my dad passed away just a couple of years after it was released. But surprisingly, throughout the venture's incredibly long and storied career, there had never been a documentary made about them. So for me to be able to do that, in a twofold sort of way, kind of as a tribute to my dad and a thing to do for him, honoring his legacy as a family member, but also as a filmmaker and a music lover, being able to get the Ventures story out there to actually quite a lot of people who maybe didn't realize the impact that they had. So it was great to put out an entertaining but educational documentary and do something nice for my dad at the same time. He approved. So
You did.
yeah, he was really happy about it and proud that it came out for me.
Yeah, and you've also produced, directed, written, and acted in many films. And I was scrolling through your IMDb page and caught the trailer for one of your films, The Fiance from 2016. And these
Oh
are right,
right, yeah,
these
that's
are right down my alley. I'm a huge horror film fan.
oh
So,
wow,
so
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So
tell me,
I
when did
produced
horror
that.
films enter your world? Like, what was there a specific film that really turned you on to the genre?
Sure. I loved the Vincent Price movies when I was a kid. My dad loved all the Universal monsters and the Vincent Price movies and stuff like that. So he and I watched those together a lot. My mom was more into the intense horror films like The Exorcist, which I watched when I was just a little kid. It was kind of scary, but I loved it. There's just something about that. Being safely scared through the screen rather than in real life is always a good thing. So I don't know, I've just always been drawn to thrillers and horror and the paranormal and the dark side of just about everything.
Vincent Price, The Wax Museum is, to this day, it's still scary to
It
watch.
is,
It's
yeah, it
just
really holds up.
Yeah, for me it was the '78 Halloween, watching it with my older brother, and it was a fall night. The leaves are
Yeah, and the
rustling around
music
here
is
in New England.
incredible too. I mean,
Oh,
as two people who love music, we can appreciate John Carpenter's score for that. What a talented man to direct, write, and do the music for that.
and he was smart enough to, I think he made certain that it was by John Carpenter. He had his name in the
Right,
title.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If you had to pick one, do you have a favorite horror film of all time?
Well, it's hard to pick just one, but
Yeah.
I am really drawn to The Shining. I love the Stanley
Oh
Kubrick
my God.
version of The Shining. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Oh my God, a fantastic movie. I watch it all the time. I ended up just buying it digitally so I can just watch it, every couple months and just put it on and to be because there's all these supposed little messages. Of course, you've heard this, right? Stanley Kubrick
Sure.
supposedly put into the movie. What do you think he was doing some subliminal messaging in there? Was he trying to tell us something?
I don't know. Geez. I mean, he had the actors doing so many takes. I don't know if he had time to think about subliminal messaging in between there too, but it's always fun to think of stuff like that, like the Wizard of Oz being perfectly timed to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. And, it's always fun to read about stuff like that. I'm not sure how much I believe it, but
Right. Well, I always say the fact that it's not true is actually more fascinating to me. The fact that you can line up Dark Side of the Moon and Wizard of Oz, and
yeah, I
it's
mean, it's just
unintentionally lining up like that.
serendipitous. Yeah, really
Right,
kind of
right.
weird.
If you could interview a famous horror film actor, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Well, I have to go back to Vincent Price.
Vincent. Yeah.
Probably because he was such an intellectual person, very well read, very artistic. He was a master chef. He loved art. So, someone like that, I think, who is a very well rounded individual beyond what they're known for, is always fun to delve into.
And what a voice.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
What a voice. Yeah. You've written both fiction and nonfiction books. One book you were nice enough to send to me, and I got it right here, was Rock and Roll Nightmares. Let's see, we've got True Stories Volume 1, and then we've got Along Comes Scary. So I got a couple of them here, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
And
Thanks for checking them out.
yeah, they're great. And Along Comes Scary, the '60s edition, short stories, and you contribute many stories to this book as well, along with other writers, including the short story titled "Papa's Got a Brand New Body Bag," which
Right.
which
I
leads
can
off.
never resist a good comedic twist on a
I,
title.
I love the way it leads off. Malachi never thought growing up in a funeral parlor was cool until now. Now there was a semi-famous rock star lying dead in the basement morgue. I love that. Now I live in Southington, Connecticut. There's a famous haunted house right near me. Haunting in Connecticut. That film
Oh
was
yeah.
based on the house, like literally like 10 minutes from
Oh
here.
my gosh. Wow. Yeah. A friend of mine, but yeah, he either produced or I don't think he directed it. Dan Farron's.
Okay.
Yeah, he's in the horror genre. Now he's doing movies that are kind of alternate reality. I think he did The Haunting of Sharon Tate and some other controversial but very fun and tawdry thrillers. So yeah, he's a great guy.
When did the idea to merge rock and roll with horror come to you? When did that idea come up?
Well, I've always been drawn to it. It's a very, very small subgenre. I remember reading a book in the 80s called, I think it was called The Scream by John Skipp and Craig Spector, and it was about an undead heavy metal band. So I always wanted to read things like that, but there weren't very many. So as I started thinking of things that I could do to further my career and kind of brand something that could have an ongoing life, which is really the only way you can make it as an author these days is with series of books. I thought, well, I want to write something that I'm not only going to enjoy, but will also fill a void in the market and hopefully find like-minded readers. Because although you can write to market perhaps and make a lot of money writing romance novels or something, that's just not me. So I wanted to do something that I would love doing and hopefully folks would love to read.
Yeah, which they have. They've done so well. Now, the book that I mentioned, the True Stories Volume 1, the first chapter gets into what is the most intriguing story of them all, which is the 27 Club. The chapter is titled Only the Good Die Young. And so many artists have died at the age of 27, and you list the most prominent in the book. And just a few that you name are Robert Johnson, he was the first. That's where this whole story began. He was 27. Brian Jones of the Stones, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Ron Pigpen McKernan of the Grateful Dead, Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, who will be the subject of a new film soon,
I know,
biopic.
I can't wait.
Right. What is it about the number 27? I mean, I've read about numerologists who say it's the complete number. John Lennon had a fascination with that number.
Yeah, there are certain numbers that are the subject of fascination. That's one of them. 23 is another one. I don't know if you recall the Jim Carrey thriller called The Number
Yeah.
23, which also has a lot of bizarre connections. And another date that I found that was, I don't think, I mean, I'm not going to say I discovered it, but I have never read anything about this. The date of December 8th is, I had some really bizarre connotations and connections in rock. The day
Really?
that John Lennon was killed, the day that Jim Morrison was born, and just a few other ones that I mentioned in the book. And I just happened to realize that as I was doing my research for the book, like this date, December 8th, kept coming up. So I did a search on Google, like what's weird about December 8th, and nothing came up. So I don't know. I just thought I better mention that.
Yeah. Well, the weird thing with Lennon too was the fact that the time I think in the UK would have been December 9. So again, there's the 9 connection. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, there are some interesting ones where like I'm a huge fan of Blind Melon and Shannon Hoon, the singer. There are guys that died just after 27. So he died like 11 months after he turned 20. Or no, I'm sorry. Was it just before?
I think he was in 26 years old, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly. Yeah, same with
right. Graham
Nick Drake.
Parsons.
And yeah, Nick Drake also is another person. Yeah, so
Okay.
26, I don't know, perhaps there's even more who passed at the age of 26, but there's just something about that number 27 that has a mysticism to it, and the fact that such pioneering icons died at that age.
Yeah.
When you think about it, they
Yeah.
weren't just famous musicians, they were actually pioneers in what they did.
Yeah. If you could, of the people in the 27 Club, if you could pick just one that you could somehow communicate with from the other side, who would it be? What would it be the first thing you'd ask them? It's got to be Jim Morrison for me.
Same. Yeah, there's actually a fictional collection put out in the Rock and Roll Nightmares series called 28. And it's what if the 27 Club would have lived. So, of course, I grabbed the story on Jim Morrison to write sort of a fanciful exploration of what he might have done if he did not die at the age of 27. So, yes, I've always found him to be a very interesting, charismatic figure, as many, many people do, of course. But yeah, there is just something about him. Would love to talk to him about poetry and filmmaking and music and just all of the things that he was into, or just kind of in line with what I love too.
Hey guys, quick heads up from the grooming front lines. Shaving your jewels doesn't have to be a risky business anymore. Thanks to our friends at Manscaped and their Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, you can forget about nicking your bits. This trimmer is all about keeping your things smooth and safe, so you can trim with confidence. Fancy a stress-free shave and some savings? Head over to manscaped.com now and save 20% off plus free shipping by using the code BOOKEDONROCK. With Manscaped, it's easy grooming and no surprises. Guys, don't be like me. Don't use a cheap razor, because if you do, get yourself a lot of Band-Aids. It's going to be a war zone down there. This 5th generation trimmer features 2 interchangeable next-gen skin-safe blade heads. A standard one for taking a little off the top, and a new foil blade to go smooth wherever your heart desires. With dual LED spotlights, you'll achieve better visibility, making every trim more precise and hassle-free. And guys, if you're worried about making a mess, don't worry. This thing's good in the shower, in the tub, in the ocean. And if that's not all, it comes in a nice traveling case so you can take it wherever you go. Get 20% off plus free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the code BOOKEDONROCK. That's 20% off plus free shipping by using the code BOOKEDONROCK. Show your balls some love. Feel free as a dove. Award-winning filmmaker and an Amazon #1 best-selling author, Stacy Layne Wilson, is our guest, and I want to ask you about the famous musicians who were thankfully still with us that you've interviewed, and there are many: John Fogerty, Jimmy Page, Joni Mitchell, Rob Zombie, Cherie Carey, Gene Simmons, to name a few. Do you have a favorite interview, and why?
Well, Jimmy Page, of course. When I was a girl at 10, 11, 12 years old, I mean, his posters were all over my wall. And who would have thought that one day I would get to interview him, and actually interviewed him twice in one day. This was for the film It Might Get Loud.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm also a massive fan of the White Stripes and Jack White, who's one of my all-time favorites. And he's really the only musician that I'll pay the big prices, the big bucks nowadays to go see live. He's just fantastic. So I got to interview him and Jimmy Page at once. It was just almost too much for a girl to handle.
Man, there's not many great guitarists these days. I mean, they're out there, but I should say there's not many great guitarists that are in the spotlight. It's just it's a bummer to see the Billboard charts, and it's like, where's the rock and roll? Where's the guitar?
Right. Yeah. Well, that I was talking recently to a friend about how it seems the glorious guitar solo has sort of gone out of style these days.
Yeah.
But
So,
they sure had a great run.
well, yeah, you look at it, going back to your, with your dad, and you go back to even like mid '50s, with Chuck Berry and all that, right up until Jack White, early 2000s, there was some great stuff that was coming out that was getting exposure, but you hope everything's cyclical. So we'll see what happens. But I want to get
Yeah.
to some of your brand new books that you've released, starting with Amplified Adventures, A Traveler's Guide to Rock Music's Hallowed Halls, a Rock and Roll Nightmares B-Sides book, the 10th book of the Rock and Roll Nightmare series. So tell us about this book, which I believe just came out last month. Was it in March or February?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I decided that it would be fun to write some very short books under 100 pages each and introduce them as a spin-off to the Rock and Roll Nightmare series called B-Sides. So these are only available as ebooks and audiobooks. They're not in paperback because they're so short and they're only 99 cents to download. So I wanted to have the opportunity to write some sort of helpful guides. So that was the first one, Amplified Adventures. And as someone who loves to travel and loves museums, I've seen quite a few great music museums all over the world. So I wanted to put a spotlight on that. And it's a pretty comprehensive list. I have not been to all of them, but the ones that I hadn't been to, I did some research on. So that's one. And then I just put out Headbangers Health with the help of some exercise and nutrition gurus to talk about health for the heavy metal musician and how to keep in prime for being on stage. And so that's another B-sides book. And then I'll be doing maybe some album guides and a short story, like a novelette.
Okay. And then one that came out in January, Rock and Roll Nightmares, freeze frame, spooky short stories with full color photos. Another great book for fans of rock and roll and horror. And I love You Make My Screams. I think is that
Yeah.
yeah. This is about a quaint Southern California record store where the latest collection isn't just rare; it's downright supernatural. The vinyl records unleash spirits from the grooves. A mystery box of records that belong to famous music producer Jack Ian, and then it turns out that he produced more than just great music, and that's a great
That's
story.
right.
Yeah. So when do these stories come to you? Do they just come out of nowhere? Do you have a recorder nearby or a notebook nearby, and you say, "Oh, that's a
Oh
good
yeah,
one."
I'm always writing notes in my phone if I come up with a great idea. I've always been one to, when it comes to fiction, I will come up with an intriguing title and then write a story from that usually. So that's generally how it works. And so I thought of that title first and then just started spinning the tale from there. I love the idea of haunted collections and cursed objects and stuff like that. I remember watching a TV series when I was a kid called Friday the 13th, which had nothing to do with the Friday the
Yes.
13th film franchise, but I believe it was a Canadian show about this antique shop where everything was haunted. And of course, there's the Stephen King book and movie, Needful Things. So stuff like that I love. And I wanted to explore that with a haunted record collection. And what really inspired me was I remember reading an article a long, long time ago online, and I could not find it again, unfortunately, but it was about things that people find in their used records. So, like little notes, concert tickets, I don't know, just stuff like that, that's weird stuff that they find inside the sleeve of the record.
Yeah.
Yeah, after bringing it home. So, that was also another kind of inspiration for that story.
Do you remember the first record you ever bought? First vinyl record?
Well, yeah, I do actually. The first two were not so cool. I guess they were, but the first one that I remember buying with my own money was Steve Martin, Comedy is Not Pretty, which is not
Awesome.
music. Well, I guess he did. He probably sang something on there. And then the second one was Donna Summer's Greatest Hits.
Wow. Downside. Well,
And
yeah.
then I got cool and I bought Led Zeppelin one.
Nice. Yeah, I was just telling a friend of mine, I was on a podcast talking about Synchronicity, The Police. That was my
Oh
first
yeah.
one. That was my first
Wow.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great album.
Yeah. One more recent release that I see on Amazon, that's Rock and Roll Nightmares, Volume 2, True Crime and Strange Stories About Rock Stars. So if you're intrigued by the story of the 27 Club, this book is for you. And it's a look at the baby groupie trend of the 70s, right? The satanic panic, the horrific home invasions, musicians who've died on stage, rockers who lived on borrowed time, gun-toting music producers, deadly DJs, and much more. Now, since I'm a huge Van Halen fan, I figured I'd start with a chapter, Run with the Devil. I'll just pick
Well,
that one.
that's just the name of the
It's just the
that's
name
just
of the
the name of it. Yeah, no, God, I love that album so much.
yeah.
The Van Halen stuff is killer. But yeah, it's just the name of it because it's about the satanic panic when
Yes.
groups were vilified for having backward masking and all that crazy stuff with the PMRC and kids committing suicide and their parents suing Ozzy Osbourne and Judas Priest and bands like that. So I thought that was a very fascinating and bizarre time in history that was so laden with conspiracy theories and whatnot, which is, I guess, we've could, like you said, things are cyclical. We're back to, back to that craziness now, but I don't see it being blamed on bands. Now it's politicians. So,
Yeah. Well, for those who aren't familiar, Aleister Crowley, what is his who is this, who is he, what is his connection to rock and roll? I know a lot about it. Jimmy Page,
oh,
there's a strong
absolutely.
connection
Yeah.
there, but yeah, who was he?
So he was active in the early part of the 20th century, and he had his own sort of cult, and he was very into, oh, it wouldn't really be called Satanism, but it was sort of that same philosophy where you do what you want, do what feels good, and screw everybody else, basically. So it was the Golden Dawn sect. It was what it was called. And Jimmy Page actually did buy the Equinox bookstore, which specialized in Aleister Crowley esoterica, and he operated that shop in London for many years. And that was a big thing in the interviews and articles about Jimmy Page in the 70s because he was interested in that. So they made him out to be sort of this black magic purveyor. And also, I don't think that many people, especially nowadays, know that David Bowie was also very much into Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, I did not know that. That I didn't know. And
Yeah, so
and
quite a few.
and Ozzy has the song Mr. Crowley. And I
Yeah,
think from what I recall, I don't think he really knows why he changed it to Crowley instead of Crowley, but Crowley is the way it's pronounced.
correct.
And if people want to hear what Aleister Crowley sounds like, just be prepared because he's creepy sounding. There's something on
Oh,
YouTube that
yeah.
I found, and I was like, "Whoa, man, that dude's." And then he collected like fingernails and jars, and it just did some crazy
Very
stuff.
weird stuff. Yeah, for sure. Um,
Jimmy bought his house, Jimmy Page, right? He bought
He did, yeah, Boleskine
mansion.
House, which was an old castle, like well, like a mini castle, just a small economy castle. But apparently it was haunted as well, and some very strange things happened there. Servants hung themselves, and people were murdered there, and all kinds of bizarre stuff. And there was even a handy underground tunnel that led straight to a cemetery.
Oh man, yeah. There's a story I think Jimmy Page tells of the sound of a head
Right.
rolling down the stairs. I think
Yeah,
that was
that's
one of the
what he
stories he told.
said.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a future book in the Rock and Roll Nightmare series. I'm going to do one about haunted houses that musicians have lived in, haunted recording studios, ghostly sightings, and stuff like that. In fact, I just finished reading Gary Newman's autobiography and learned that when he was very young, I believe 13 or 14, he saw a ghost in the subway that was a very well dressed uh, man with a beautiful gray suit and a tie, and he actually channeled that character for some of his album covers, like The Pleasure Principle.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
So
That's interesting.
I'm gathering fun stories to put in a whole collection
So
of
you're going to include the one with the Red Hot Chili Peppers recorded at a mansion that was haunted, right? So that
pardon.
the Red Hot Chili Peppers, there was a place that
Oh
they
yeah,
recorded at. It
that's
was,
right. And of
yep.
course, Nine Inch Nails recorded in the house where Sharon Tate and her friends were murdered. And there's quite a few interesting and dark stories about that.
What do you make of backwards masking? Like, is that all because I remember with Zeppelin, that was a big thing with Stairway to Heaven, and they were just laughing at it like this is the silliest thing ever.
Right. Jimmy Page said it's hard enough to record a song the right way around, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did
Well,
that start? There was just some fan that started that whole thing, I believe.
hmm,
Some fan just started that whole thing. He called into a radio
possibly.
station or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Who knows? But it's like any kind of thing that's a little creepy. It's always fun to explore, but I don't know how much stock I really put into it.
Yeah. There are artists like Dave Mustaine, who you note in the chapter, steered away from anything remotely satanic or evil, and he became a born again Christian in 2002
Mm.
and refused to tour with bands deemed even remotely satanic. Now, can an artist take it too far? Is there a point where you feel it would they cross over from being harmless and intended for entertainment purposes to something that can have a serious effect on either the artist or a fan? Because to me, it's just entertainment. I just it's an
Well, yeah, if
expression.
you're a level-headed, sane person, it's just
Yeah,
entertainment, but you can't predict what some perhaps unbalanced person might take away from even the most innocuous of lyrics. So I don't think that an artist should worry about that too much.
yeah. So we've covered quite a bit of ground. What can we expect to see in the future? You did mention some projects you're working on, like films, books, documentaries in the works. Anything you want to let people
Yeah,
know
well,
about?
there's a brand new Rock and Roll Nightmares book out called Blood on the Tracks that just came out a few weeks ago, and it's about the tragedies behind some of our favorite songs. So it goes deep into the meanings behind some songs that were based either on friends who committed suicide, people who were murdered, or serial killers, or things like that. So that's one book that's just out now. And then Parallel Lines, the speculative fiction Rock and Roll Nightmares entry, is in just came out, but right now in the works, there's an audiobook that I'm very excited about, and we just turned it into audible.com. So that should be out in about a week. So for those who don't have time to read or want to listen to some fun stories on the commute, most of the Rock and Roll Nightmares books are available via audio. And then I am currently working on the first novel in the Rock and Roll Nightmare series. It's called Farewell Tour, and it's about a shock rocker who wants to retire, but his fans will not let him by any means necessary.
Oh, what a great storyline. Oh, that's great. And people can find you online too. You have a website.
Absolutely. It's my name, stacylanewilson.com. And from there, you can spin off into all my social media and whatnot. I try to be on every platform, but it gets a bit overwhelming at times. So my
Yeah.
favorites are Instagram and Facebook. The Rock and Roll Nightmares book series does have its own Instagram account and the Facebook group too.
Yeah, it is hard to keep up with it. There's so many.
No
It's
kidding.
I'm just thinking, please don't have any more. I mean, we've got enough. And the podcast too. We want to talk about that. You have your own
Oh,
podcast.
yeah, that's right. I have a podcast.
You had my friend, I believe, Darren Paltrowitz on recently to talk about his
Yeah,
David
talking
Lee Roth
about
book.
Van Halen and his great book DLR.
Yep.
Yeah. So yes, I'm almost up to 100 episodes of the Rock and Roll Nightmares podcast right now, and I put a focus on authors because I love books about rock, but there are also musicians and photographers and just anyone who's kind of connected with horror and rock.
That's great. Well, Stacy, thank you for doing this. It's great to meet you finally. I'm glad we were able to do this, and all the best in the future. You've got a fan here, so I'm looking forward
Oh,
to.
thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to whatever's coming next, and I still have more of these short stories to read. I got
Oh
through
yeah,
quite a
you
few of
got
them.
plenty
So,
to keep you busy.
all right, thanks, Stacy.
Thank you.